Hi everybody, welcome to week 10. We're going to talk right now about introductions. Introductions, as you can imagine, are usually the first thing that people read when they pick up a paper, and so for that reason they are incredibly important. So we're just going to talk a little bit right now about some of the things that an introduction can do for you, what its purposes are, and also a couple of different approaches that you can take. So as I said, the introduction is the first thing that people read when they pick up your paper, so it does this job of taking people who are thinking about what they're going to stream on Netflix when they get home tonight or what they might want to eat for dinner later, and it funnels them from regular life into focusing on your paper. So you've got to think that you're taking somebody and grabbing their attention and then sort of focusing it in on what you want them to be thinking about. So the introduction also, if the first thing it does is bring the reader into from the outside world into the world of your paper, the second thing it does is it establishes what you're talking about, why you're talking about it, that's your exigence a little bit anyway, and it may give them some brief targeted background so that they have the information that they need to understand your claim when it comes. Often you'll have done a lot of research that the average person may not have, and so even to understand the thing that you're arguing, they might need a little bit of background information. Not too much, but a little bit. So that's the second thing, is the what, why, and background, I guess. That's all lumped together. And the other thing it does, the other major function, is it prepares the reader to be invested in the thesis. This kind of ties in with the question of exigence, but once the reader has information to understand what the thesis is and also understands why the thesis is important, they're now set up so that you can slip in there and be like, now that I've established all this, here's my argument, and they'll be like, ooh, I see, and stroke their real or imaginary beard. So that's what you're going for. So what can these look like? There are some basic structures that are pretty common. One of them is something I call the funnel, that starts broad and then it narrows toward your topic. One pitfall here that you need to make sure you avoid is do not start too broad. I graded a paper once years ago that literally said, since the beginning of time, people have loved movies. There have not been movies since the beginning of time. But regardless of factual issues, don't give a professor a since the beginning of time thing. You don't need to start at the beginning of time. Start closer, right? We don't need to encompass the whole of human history and I guess natural history as well. Sometimes I think about it as you may need that, right? You may need that for yourself to get started writing. That's like runway that you need so that your plane can take off. It's fine to need the runway, but the reader does not need the runway. So once you've written yourself into where you need to be, take a look at what you've got and make sure that everything that you have is necessary. And if not, cut it off. Get rid of it. Start with the plane launching into the air. Another thing that you might want to avoid, unless your paper is literally about how we define a word, try not to start with the definition. While this isn't technically wrong per se, it is kind of a cliche, and you don't usually want to put a cliche as the first thing that people see when they see your paper. It doesn't necessarily put people in the right frame of mind to be receptive to your brilliant insights. So if you're doing a funnel and giving kind of broad and then narrowing into your topic, then don't start too broadly and don't try not to start with a definition. Sorry, got some cat distractions. In your broad to narrow, you often will also give information that people are going to need to understand the thesis, as I said before. But make sure that, first of all, you're not giving too much. This should not be, a full page. And second, make sure that the information is curated specifically to lay the groundwork for the thesis. Don't have us spend half a page reading about something over here and then put the thesis here and make us pivot immediately. Whatever is in your introduction, this is the case for your whole paper, that you should never have things in there that don't belong there or aren't necessary for your argument, but especially in your introduction everything should lead in a tidy little line to that claim that you're going to make at the end of the paragraph. Okay, so that's kind of the funnel approach. The opposite of the funnel is the start specific and get more general. Now, this doesn't mean that you start with a person and end up with since the beginning of time, but you might tell a story about, say, if you're studying people fighting about whether businesses should reopen during coronavirus, you could start with, on March 29th, such and such a person posted this thing on Twitter. It immediately got 67 responses in varying states of anger. And then you start from that specific and you back out to be like, there's a lot of conflict about whether things should reopen, and then you lead into your thesis. So you can think of this as a telling case, one example that sort of has all of the components of everything that you want to talk about in your paper. Try not to ask your reader to imagine things. Imagine that you're sitting at home in your apartment with no one but your cats to keep you company. Do you put on Netflix? Do you learn to bake bread? Don't do that. That's another thing that feels a little bit cliche as a paper opening. And then another thing you can do, another sort of structure, is this idea of a misperception. Most people think this about this topic, but actually this is the case, and you're going to show why. So you can kind of lay the groundwork for what most people think, and then in the last sentence or two, talk about why that might not be the case, and then make your claim. So the three kinds of introductions, these are not the only kinds of introductions, but these are kinds of introductions, are the funnel, the anecdote, and the misperception. So that's just a little bit of template. Oh my gosh. Sorry. That's just a little bit of template work that you can use in your introductions if you wish.